If you can do all your stuff, what can figure it out? That's how it chooses you.
Well, Claire Chang and I talked a little bit yesterday about how to introduce or what she's going to talk about, that kind of thing. And I said I would say how she and I met and became friends, and that maybe that would sort of get things rolling and we would approach it from that direction.
Yeah, because something about my brain is, you could probably edit this and put it somewhere else relevant, but something about my brain, I get really excited about things and then they go. Like, not that I don't care, but I can't access them. So I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to talk about. I can see it all and then it's all gone. It's just like flash of a light. So we'll find our way. But yeah. Teresa, as I'm sure you two are, Teresa and I are pretty good at ranting, so I imagine this will be a fine space.
I'm not worried.
I just want to say first how excited I am to have the two of you, be looking at the two of you at the same time. I'm so excited. I feel like my heart is going to come out of my chest. It's so, I'm actually crying. It's so wonderful.
Should probably keep it in there, but great. That's so sweet.
Oh, you and your practical point of view. So our guest today, this is It Chooses You. I am Teresa Sparks.
And I'm Claire Patton.
And this is a podcast where we talk about things we love and what that says about us. Something like that. Our guest today is Claire Chang, who is an amazing human being in many ways, as you will discover as you listen. And Claire is here today because I was lucky enough to work alongside her in a horrible place, trying to do good things in a bad environment for a really long time. And because of that experience, we are basically army buddies now. We have trauma bonded, and I hope we'll be in each other's lives until we die. So we've invited her to be on the podcast because, as I said, she's amazing.
No pressure, Claire.
No pressure. Yeah.
You had me at trauma and war wounds and death.
Be amazing now.
Yeah.
Now.
And go. Do you guys remember Jerry Seinfeld was like, at one point he had somebody introduce him who was like, and now the funniest man in the entire world. And after it, he kind of grabbed the guy by his lapels. He's like, don't ever fucking introduce someone like that again. That is fucking insane what you just set me up for. So I'm sorry. I should have learned that lesson.
I am. I'm feeling quite nauseous.
Yeah, actually, Claire is completely average. She's completely average. Nothing amazing going on. She's just a person that we like. And so now here she is.
I feel my nervous system regulating. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Better to lower the bar.
It's true.
Proceed.
It's true. I'm sorry.
She's all right.
Please continue listening. Yes.
That's why you're here, right? You want just like normal stuff? Yeah, we're doing normal stuff. All normal.
We are. We will. We'll get back there.
Yeah. So more recently, Claire is a teacher of yoga, and I have been, you guys don't know this, but I'll be explicit about it now. I have a 4-part plan, and part 1 is get hot. And the goal of get hot is to have lots of sex. And so the get hot part includes the yoga. And maybe you thought I was doing it because I wanted to integrate my mind and my body or something. That's totally not why. All of that is
that you had not specified those goals when you spoke with me.
Just a little surprise. So you're an unknowing part of Plan Get Hot.
Happy to be part of it.
I want to know what steps 2, 3, and 4 are, too.
I'm not sure I do, but
Really?
Maybe for another podcast.
This may not be the time or the place. It may be the place, but not the time.
It's morning for me, not night.
Oh, yeah. We were on the... Claire Chang and I were on the phone yesterday, and it was afternoon for her, and it was almost bedtime for me, and she had full-on afternoon energy, and she was, like, loud and, like, going and boisterous and quick, and I was like, please stop. I can't handle it. I'm about to fall asleep. Please stop. And she's like, oh, do you need me to put on my yoga teacher voice and tell you to breathe? And I was like, no, you don't need to be fake. Just stop yelling.
Well, I don't have a yoga teacher voice, just to let everybody know.
for about the last 2 months, I have been attending 2 of Claire's yoga classes a week. And it's been amazing for a lot of reasons, mostly because it's completely horrible most of the time that it's actually happening, and then it's fine immediately after, and I feel better. And so, it's so funny. We've talked before, Claire Patton and I, about how we laugh too much in this podcast, and so it's funny to see you like deliberately shutting your laughter down. But it sucks. It's fucking horrible. The last class I took with her, as a matter of fact, I wept openly for about the first 15 minutes because what we were doing was so challenging.
Sell it.
What kind of yoga is this?
Oh, now I'm not going to say.
Torture yoga.
Continue. I will have lots to say. Continue.
But it doesn't have to be. I'm pushing myself perhaps harder than I might. I certainly was not following your instructions, which are usually to like find the edge where your mind still trusts you and you're not screaming silently to yourself, and find that edge and stay just on this side of it. I was like, no, I can do it. And then my brain was like, fuck you. So it was fully my fault. I didn't listen to my teacher, and I had a challenging experience. But that yoga has been really great for me. Just sort of, I've discussed this with Claire Patton before and on the podcast before, I think. I often feel like a brain on a stick. Like my body is just a little meat suit that is like carrying my brain around and experiencing things. And, that is funny. But perhaps not the most functional way of being in the world. And so this class has definitely helped me. Like I'm aware of where I am in space more, which is nice. And I'm stronger, which is also nice. I'm more able to find quiet and rest and stillness in the middle of insanity, which is super useful because it turns out the world is fucking crazy all the time in all ways now. So yeah, been super helpful. And that's how we know one another most recently. So I don't know if you have any specific memories or you want to add anything to the army portion of our friendship, the military part.
Oh gosh, not so much. I'll hesitate. I hesitate in going there for my own war wounds, which I guess is what we're kind of talking about today. How we suffer, how we create our own suffering, how other people kind of add to that suffering, what on earth to do about it all. And I think you have to experience suffering. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I'm just off the back of your story. It's like, yeah, you have to go to the source, and the source is more often than not us,
Right.
Yeah.
But it took you 7 years to get to yoga. Wasn't that what we were saying the other day?
Yeah. Claire.
You were like, this is great. And yeah, I finally listened after 6 years. You told me about this 6 years ago.
Yeah. When we worked together, she was like, I teach yoga classes. I go to this yoga. I think it'd be really good for you. And I was like, yeah. I'm not doing that.
That's you're about the average length of time it takes to address suffering. Like it actually takes a long time to move ourselves into something better.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's fascinating to me because I was completely miserable and I knew I was miserable. And you were like, hey, did you know that you're choosing to be miserable? At least in this little particular way? And I was like, but I can't make a different choice. I'm going to continue to choose it. Yeah.
Claire, how long have you been suffering? I'm just kidding. How long have you been teaching yoga?
38 years, 5 minutes. No. Doing yoga for almost 15 years. And I found meditation before that. That was more suffering to me than yoga has ever been, which is why I look for yoga. Because I ran into a brain that was incredibly active, which I hadn't realized necessarily in a very conscious way, and could not just sit down for the life of me. And then all this stuff in my body was there. So sort out yoga. But I can go back further, and it's I actually went to meditation too as a way to, go back further than that. I was suffering a lot and kind of not in society, dealing with a lot of trauma, was not functioning very well. And so as I started to take my steps back into being in the world and socializing and going to university and all these things that people do for whatever reasons, my therapist was like, you need to socialize more, you need to talk to people more, you need to be in the world more. And I was like, fine, I'll find an activity to do. And I thought, well, what activity can I do where I don't have to talk to people and actually socialize? And I found meditation. So without any background of any knowledge of any of that world or anything, I wasn't studying psychology then. I wasn't, just nothing to do with my own mental health, like Buddhism, spiritual practice, yoga, none of it was on my radar. I went to so I could say I was socializing, but actually not have to talk to people. And they were, at the university I went to, the meditation group was, mostly Asians, and I'm half Asian, and that felt very comfortable to me. They're my people. Kind of, they're also all studying like information technology and computer science, and they're also more my people at that time. So it was great. And it took me right into probably what I wanted to avoid, and then some. And that was probably the start of my path unraveling and looking more at, suffering broadly, how the mind works, what health actually is, how on earth to help people in, dealing with a lot of difficulty. So then after I couldn't settle, go.
I want to hop in because it sounds to me like you started it as a con. So that you could tell your therapist you were taking the advice, but like only obeying the letter of the law, not the spirit of it.
100%.
But then it actually conned you back and was like, ha ha ha, I'm still going to be helpful.
Yeah.
So, a mischievous connection.
Sometimes you just have to put yourself in the position and of something better. Seemingly something, like in theory, something better. In practice, there's a quote that I'm really liking lately, like in theory and practice are the same thing. In practice, they are not. Right? So in theory, it can be this wonderful thing. In practice, it is not that. But at the end of the day, theory and practice will come together if you stay in it long enough.
Cool.
So it was a con, absolutely, and one that slapped me straight in the face, which this is also, that's been my experience anyway, of how these things work. You can't really escape yourself for too long. You are the main thing. You are the environment that you are always in, wherever you go. You will find yourself if, wherever. You don't get to leave yourself, basically. So you better figure out how on earth to deal with what is here. That's kind of where I rest with it anyway.
Yeah.
That is at once so wise and so fucking practical. I love it.
Nice.
Hey, better learn how to deal with yourself, because you're not going anywhere until you do.
Yeah, you cannot escape the meat sack. It is with you. And eventually you are very aware it is with you every day, or you are very aware that the racing mind and the anger or, just the distress is there. At some point it will catch up, because at some point we'll be taken down until we're forced to just be with it. This is so uplifting today, isn't it? To whoever's listening.
This isn't an uplifting podcast.
Well, but I do find that comforting,
Yes.
on some level, because it is the human condition.
Yes.
We're in it together, in a sense.
Well, it's also actionable, right? Like if you have, if we say like control is an illusion, okay, in terms of like larger, anything outside of our meat sack, maybe. But like I can actually decide what I put in my face. I can decide what my legs are going to do if I choose to, So the action steps are right there, which is cheering to me.
It is. And I think, most as a psychotherapist, because I work in psychotherapy as well, it's really just that people don't know, they don't have enough of the skills in the in-between, because you want to just put food in your face, because you're dealing with emotions. And the only reason you're putting food in your face is because you don't actually know how to deal with those emotions. But we're not taught these things, but there are ways, you know, or so I think the world's, go.
I was going to say, it turns out one of the ways is to not follow your yoga teacher's instructions and weep uncontrollably for the first 15 minutes.
You run into yourself, until you figure it out. We've just created an environment where you get to learn how to work with yourself. And you get to see, if I do this, I'm going to suffer like a lot. And if I maybe listen and do this, I will suffer less. And it's a very contained little experiment space we set up, same as the therapy room, different focus. But yeah, and we don't stop. We're all busy doing stuff in the world to actually stop and just try out that moment. Wow, oh my gosh, this is here in this moment. What the hell do I do with it? You know? Oh, I usually try all this stuff and it just creates more unrest in me. Oh, maybe I'll try something else. Like, that's it. It's just that basic.
Yeah.
And it's terrifying to do consciously or move towards, I feel like, for most people.
Well, yeah, in the moment of it felt impossible. I was like, no, I should do more. Like, that was my impulse, is I should just, like, try harder, do more. And it was miserable. It was absolutely miserable. Not after. No, it didn't injure myself. I hated you for a moment or two. Like, I wanted to blame right? I wanted to blame someone else for it, even though I was choosing not to listen to you and do whatever the fuck I wanted to do. Yeah. That was a big lesson class. Yeah.
Awesome.
That's great. Lesson class. I texted you after too. This is hysterical. Yeah. I texted her after and I was like, that was absolutely horrible. And she's like, nothing.
I was crying the first the class. That's
and she
great.
Was like,
perfect.
It's gone now though, right? And I was like, well, yeah.
Hey, how about you try living in the moment?
It was awesome. It was so awesome. I was like, yeah, that's good. That's good shit. Also, what the fuck is wrong with me? Jesus, why would I keep doing it? I was like, try harder. Fuck that. Just ease up, maybe. You have a different choice.
Isn't it extraordinary? Here. I give you the choice to come out of a pose. There is always an escape route.
Yep. And
yet people will continue and stay and push, despite every single word coming out of my mouth instructing the opposite. Yep. And people blame yoga. This is one of the big issues. People leave class, although often teachers will teach in that direction to do more, but even in classes that are not people, we are pushing ourselves and creating a lot of problems, and then we blame the things that we just engaged with as if they did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was so
It's extraordinary.
Yeah. It was amazing. I was like,
and you see it. It's all in it happens just bang. It's there in a moment.
Okay. Received. Yeah. It was pretty, it was extraordinary.
Good, Teresa.
Yeah. You had also been telling me that you've recently been working on several different books. Speaking of seeing an entire picture at once and then trying to recapture it piece by piece.
Well, I just started another one this morning.
Okay. Well, choose
It's getting a little out of hand for me. Yeah. It's an interesting process how to explain my mind, but I've only ever it's like when I can see very big pictures and try and distill them, and then it's gets a little messy in the practice of that because my mind works faster than anything else I can, including capturing thought or using my body to capture thought. It gets a little lost. But yes, I guess all of those books together are variations of exactly this, I guess, trying to articulate or help in identifying the ways of filling in those skills that we don't have, like identifying which skills we don't have and how to get them in helping ourselves. My mind's all over the place now.
That's cool. Go ahead, yeah.
Could you talk about what some of those skills might be specifically?
Oh, gosh. Well, yeah, part of it is, unfortunately, a lot of it is just identifying the way that we do things wrong, including how we get yoga wrong, including how psychotherapy is as a profession has maybe got a few things wrong in understanding the human condition, and how to return us to, well, from the starting point of our experience, you know, how to start with our experience and work from there, and and also how to have some understanding of what it is to be healthy and whole, and how do we get that idea, how do we have that image of ourselves if there's nothing out there that's reflecting it back to us, you know?
Yeah, I was going to say we don't have a lot of examples of that.
Yeah, and for yoga, at least, at the end of the day, we have to extend to the picture of we are part of nature, and really looking at how nature operates, the qualities of that. It's very adaptable, you know, it does go through cycles of death and rebirth. It knows how to let go of things, you know, seasons come, they change, landscapes get wiped out differently. It has different weather systems, which you could think of as emotions. It knows how to just have everything flowing in sync. It never gets stuck. It never gets stuck. And our systems are part of, we're beings, we're animals, we're a kind of animal species like anything else, and our brains have allowed us to get out of sync with that natural flow that's there. So it's like how to get out of the way so that nature can flow back through. And in that case, it knows how to heal. It knows how to align. We don't have to do anything. It's just there operating within us. So our brains, our thinking brains, what we think is the greatest evolution on this planet in terms of our intelligence, is not. Yeah.
Yeah, you say in class sometimes, well, not sometimes, you say it frequently. You're like, you don't have to try and move particular muscles. Just tell your brain what you want. Just tell your brain what you want and try and do it. But don't think about particular muscles. Don't try and micromanage. Just send the message and let your brain figure it out.
Yeah. I think it's a hard thing for anybody to grasp. I think.
Well, I mean, we rail against capitalism, and yet here I was in a moment where I was experiencing suffering that I was creating, and my impulse was to do greater and more. Which is exactly incorrect. And I could have identified that as a problem in almost any other circumstance, right? Maybe the answer isn't more. Maybe it isn't harder. Maybe it isn't longer, you know? But no, not in that moment. It's fascinating.
Yeah, we forget how we are the culture. There's no separate, we're still part of it. We can't escape it, even as for myself too. Like it's a hard time to think you could rise outside or above it. Like it's operating somewhere inside of us, and that's the exact work. You genuinely remove that, dissolve that tendency in your system and your being, and then you're a different force in the world. You're an entirely different power in the world. In that, when you actually can consistently stay in that place with yourself, then who knows what opens up. Unfortunately, you'll be very clear then on how much suffering and how much dysfunction there is outside of you. But, and I think that's what pulls a lot of people back into these habits of mind, habits of doing and being. There's a lot more comfortability and still being connected and belonging even to the whole, even if it's incredibly dysfunctional and unhealthy. Yeah.
Well, and when you said, Claire, the thing about being adaptable and finding that place where the cycles and where nature can flow through you, that reminds me a lot of what you're studying, Teresa, with your herbal, I should call it Chinese medicine?
It is, yes. Traditional Chinese medicine is officially what it's called.
Yeah. Yeah, there seems like there is a lot of connection there.
Yeah, I mean, those systems they come from Taoism, so they're entirely nature-based, and they're about balance and flow, and opposites interpenetrating and, you know, opposing, but not one taking over the other one receding, but then the one that recedes comes back, and the one that took over recedes, and
continual flow. And that's what yoga is, the science and practice of a cessation of opposing forces. And actually my teacher's doing a workshop right now. He's always referencing this stuff, but it is exactly that, because it's how to get balance back in. And I think something that always, it's interesting because when issues come up, whether they be mental issues, physical issues, we tend to just hone in this isolated fashion and try and fix these problems. And that's the entirety of Western medicine, you know, and also Western psychology. And that we're in an interesting moment where that's kind of blending with more Western methods and that, but there's problems in what's happening there. Lost my train of thought again.
It's fine. I like it when you lose your train of thought. Well, but speaking of trains is a great segue, because the idea that we're a collection of discrete parts that you can work on one without impacting the others, I think is pretty clearly attributable to industrial revolution and development of that kind of machinery, right?
Yeah.
And so I get really interested in at least not so much from a Western European perspective in doing this research, but like finding out what conceptions of humans were before that kind of industry. Because, you know, we talk about, the brain is a machine, or like, and now, the brain is a computer. I'm like, I don't know if it is, bro. What was it before there was a machine? Like, what did we call it? Did we know what it was at all? Did we have a thought about it? Some cultures did. There's 2,500 years of written history in China about this way of, you know, what a brain is and what it does, you know, that is not based on a machine. So I get kind of interested in following those threads.
I mean, even looking at the brain as an individual thing, trying to understand any of it outside of body, mind, you know, consciousness, spirit, if you want to go to that level, you'll never find the answers to me. That level of that kind of reductionism will just never actually, it may reflect back things that more Eastern, in inverted commas, practices know, but it will never come up with a better system or a better way of addressing things from such a limited point of view. So it's the battle we're up against, I feel, in Western culture. And then, unfortunately, we just import a lot of stuff from more with the world wisdom traditions. You know, we mostly reference Eastern ones when we think of yoga and meditation, but anything, it could be shamanism from Europe or South America, wherever these ideas are coming back in. We've one of them, we're talking about books. You know, we've made the user error. It's nothing that it's not that a lot of people think, yoga's missing this, meditation's missing this, you know, these shamanic practices are missing this, or some other tribal practices are not, you know, they don't fit our culture, but we haven't seen our own minds to understand the filter that we've already taken in all these practices through to make those errors. Those things are complete systems. They have been for, you know, almost hundreds of thousands of years, if we're talking about shamanism anyway, which was everywhere, but what's still existing, you know, that has hundreds of thousands of years of history behind it. And, we fail to, you know, I think the Western mindset that thinks it knows better hasn't seen itself, which is a very hard thing. How do you see the water that you swim in? You know, how do you, when it is the water you swim in? So there's still a lot to learn. And actually my teacher, Francisco Cayute, I will give him a plug. He was saying, modern medicine thinks it knows everything, but nature, knows much more, and nature knows the entirety of experience, you know, and so what are we aligning to? Modern medicine will come up with a lot more knowledge and interesting information, but it will never capture what it is to be human. It just cannot through its methods, so...
So going back to this a little bit, your personal story, you were in meditation, and then I'm just curious, when you went to that first yoga class, was it like a light bulb moment for you, or was it something more subtle that occurred?
No, my first yoga class was a light bulb moment. So after I literally, it was like within 3 days. So when I was like, this meditation, what is going on in my body? There's like stuff going on in my body. And at that time too, I had pretty severe, well, I was going through pretty severe anorexia. And so my body was shot, and I was running into it and just realizing like, oh, I think I've destroyed myself. I think I've destroyed my body. What to do? Anyway, so between crazy mind, crazy body, I was like looking into yoga. I searched online. That time it was what? Mid-2000s, around there. And first one that came up, I was like, where do I want to go? Like, I found a practice, had no idea about yoga. I found the practice that was like, oh, it's a self-led practice, basically.
Once again, you're like, how do I be alone in this?
Yeah, and then every once a week they have a led practice, but the teacher will teach you how to practice, and then it's a self-led practice, and the teacher kind of molds each person's practice as they go through. And it was by the beach on the coast of Sydney, and I was like, oh, that'll be nice. And it was early in the morning, and I had a lot of insomnia, so I was just like, oh, that'll be perfect, get my day done and practice done. And what I had found was what is called Mysore Ashtanga practice, which is the A-type practice. It's a very physical-based practice. It's the same sequence. There's all these different levels. It's pretty physically intense. A great deal of mental focus. So the first class I went, I because it was new, I didn't jump into it being so physical, so it wasn't so taxing on me. It was more that teacher, showing me some things. And honestly, I do remember being in, I think it was a standing pose, and just feeling my whole body like working for me, like actually working, like able to stand. I mean, very basic. I wasn't pushing at all, but just that I'd gotten through probably half of what the first half of what she was teaching me that day, and it was just capable and responding, and I thought I killed it. So it was actually a very powerful moment for me, and very relieving, and quite, for me at that time, very emotional. Just that my body was still there and alive, and I hadn't destroyed it, and still connected to me, because I think so much of my history in that was external disconnection, and then a great deal of internal disconnection. And even to have me connected back to my body was like a very big moment. Even though that practice then, given the nature of that practice, kind of fed into my A-typeness and destroyed me essentially a handful of years later, but I moved on. It can create a lot of problems, but in the wrong hands or with the wrong understanding. So yeah, it did immediately speak to me, and then it didn't speak to me, and I had to question some things about yoga and what was happening. And because to me, I was getting injured, see other people around me getting injured. The culture and the community was a little, can I swear on this podcast? That's a ridiculous question, I know. It was a bit fucked up, like it was pretty fucked up actually. So then I just started to question what is going on here, because given then by that time I'd studied and read a lot as well. Like yoga, these practices, acupuncture, whatever, they are only supposed to heal. They are only supposed to bring positive outcomes, not in a narrow way, but in a more, like with a bigger picture way. And if it is harming, or if people are getting injured, or if they're feeling manipulated or fucked up by what's going on, something is not right. And that's not the yoga. We're not doing something right with that discipline. And I feel like that's still happening in yoga, but that bumped me out of there. And then I found my way to the other kind of main traditional, and I want to put that in inverted commas too, traditional practice of Iyengar. And that had its own difficulties too, but not much less aggressive a practice. But it has to question again. And I think we so many times put our authority outside of ourselves, we don't trust what we experience or forget the truth of what we experience, like whether that's true or rational or reasonable enough. Just, we don't just honor that and trust that to be the path to learn something new, and I think in so many cases, particularly around yoga, medicine, any helping professions, people put their faith in these systems and people and bodies, and they totally stop listening to themselves somewhere in that process. And that's exactly the opposite to what every single one of those practices and modalities are supposed to offer us. They are supposed to return us to ourselves, to know how to listen. And I think there's still a lot. I think all these books that I'm juggling at the moment, there's still so much to articulate in that space of how we relate, and how we practice, and how we do all these things that we do in trying to find help and healing and reduce our suffering and feel genuinely better. There's still a lot of missing pieces out there in our understanding.
Yeah, I was fascinated because one of the things I thought after that class I had such a hard time with is like how much I wanted it to be someone else's fault. Like I wanted the problem to be outside of me so badly. And then I was like, yeah, but you made all of those choices. And it happened, I mean, I think relatively quickly for a human being. I was like half an hour later, I was like, oh yeah, that was all fucked up and that was all me. But like how much, like I consider myself a strong personality and I would never be in a cult. And I was like, please be my cult leader. You're being you're being a bad cult leader right now. And you're like, bitch, I'm not even, what are you talking about? That's not what just happened.
I'd have you in my cult any day.
I'm a good first follower. I am in your cult.
You are a first follower. Yeah, we talked about this.
Yeah. Claire, I showed you that video, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You should explain it for the
audience.
Yes.
So there's a wonderful video out there. If you Google the first follower, I think you'll find it on YouTube. I'm not sure exactly what it's called, but that's how you can find it. And it's a video of a young man dancing at a music festival, and he's all by himself, and everyone else is sitting down. And it's narrated like an anthropology film from the 50s. Like we're going to look at human behavior from this. Look at what these things are doing. Notice the single person out there dancing all by himself. And everyone else is sitting down. And then someone gets up to join him. And suddenly he's no longer crazy. Suddenly it's like, oh, now it's a thing. Basically, the first follower is the one who makes it a thing and makes it okay for other people to do it. And it's a really funny video because it's shot like an anthropology, documentary, like a field video. But the tribe is people who go to music festivals. But yeah, it's wonderful. So that idea of being the first follower, I think in some ways I'm like built to be a first follower. I certainly don't want to be the leader. I've never wanted to be the leader. But when I recognize something is awesome, I'm like, hey, y'all, this is awesome. Like, let's go do this. Hey, come on, everybody. Look, if I can do it, come on, you can do it too. So it was pretty lovely. Check that video out.
Yeah, so the first follower, where are all the people that you're getting as a class?
Well, it happened much more quickly in a music festival setting.
Need music, noted.
Yes, be music, that's right.
Yeah, but it's interesting, like, what does it take? And I think there's all studies on that sort of stuff about, we're looking to people to condone or give it, the green flag, white flag, whatever it is in the direction of something that's helpful before we're willing to try it. We're pack followers, so.
Mm-hmm. Is this berry safe to eat? Cool.
You try it first. Yeah, exactly.
I did. It's fine. Come on.
Still alive.
Yep.
Well, Claire, Teresa and I talk a lot about things that are difficult but really good for us. And I really put yoga in that category.
Mm-hmm. And
I don't even mean that yoga itself is particularly challenging for me. It's just challenging to get myself to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about yoga in that sense? Is it something that after you've practiced for so many years, it probably becomes easier to continue to practice, or is that something you still struggle with?
Oh, no, for sure. It becomes it's just part of life. It's necessary. I mean, the yoga, and because we don't have time to break down yoga in the West and how it's basically not yoga, and it's hard to be like, only the yoga I do is yoga. I don't believe that's entirely true, although I do believe my teacher and the method that I practice and teach in is probably the only thing that can offer the full potential of what, or the closest thing at this point to offer the full potential of what yoga, the original yoga, had intended for us. So, and that's after many years of exploring. So that's how I hold yoga. But yeah, over the years, it absolutely becomes easier. It's a necessary hygiene practice is how we talk about it. It's like brushing your teeth, washing your body, bathing, whatever. We have to look after our body, and this is one method that does that very well. It cleans up layers of chemical depositions that set in, the old traumas that are stuck in the body. It helps all those places unwind. It keeps functioning of our internal organs. Like, it's necessary. We need it. Our body needs to be moved, and it in particular, this yoga I do acknowledges this moment that we're living in, where we're more sedentary, or we have a lot of repetitive, even if you're not sedentary, but you do a lot of repetitive activity, as many people do, running, cycling, working with machinery and that sort of stuff. And that has a particular impact on the body that we need to address. So they're unique challenges of this current time. So this yoga is to address that. And when you really understand that and then experience it as helping you function day to day, it just becomes something you need to do. I don't know if Teresa has getting some of that flavor, like to understand the impact it has on you.
Yeah, my baby practice. First of all, it reminds my brain to check on my body. Like, hey, remember you're not alone up there. Remember you're a part of something. So that's been really useful. And also, I took a week off when you were sick. And I didn't practice for 6 days. And when I came back, everything sucked. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, you learned.
My body was like, oh, we're doing this again, are we? Well, and even today I was, I'm hunched over a lot. I'm studying a lot. So I sit a huge portion of the day. And when I'm taking notes, I'm like bent and hunched and, my arms are tense and up here. And I found myself more than usual sort of being like, hey, how about you straighten up? Can you also write from this position? Like, can you find something that's a little more in line with gravity, please? And before, as I have mentioned, I would just like, oh, it's fine. And I would just bend and bend and bend until my head was basically almost on the table. I'm 44 and it took me a really long time to develop these habits and to get my body into this place. And if the body does hold our memories, I've never done any significant like dredging and draining of those or working with them in my body in any real way. And so the idea that something that took 43 years to develop could be fixed in 2 months of taking yoga for an hour twice a week is silly if you look at it in those terms. Like, yeah, there has to be some sort of like, it's taken a while to get here, it's going to take a while to get out of it or to move past it. And the thing that interests me about the way you look at it, Claire, is you talk a lot about, I don't quite know how to say it. Like, I want to talk about when we think we're in danger, but actually we're uncomfortable. And that, danger is a problem and forcing yourself into danger is a problem, but not all discomfort is danger. And so there's, lots of different kinds of yoga, right? And I think, some yoga is a lot more aggressive.
What I pick out of that, what kind of lands in me out of what you just said is, this internal sense of danger and threat that we basically carry around with us that is old. It's a lot of different, for some of us, it's a lot of different experiences stacked on top of each other that have just trained us to always be anxious, always be hypervigilant, always perceive some threat, And this is actually what we call trauma. Like, that's actually what we're diagnosing when we look at symptoms in people. There's just this chronic sense of perceived threat in the world that then prevents them from doing things, in the most simplest terms. And in some ways we all are, just given given the state of our world at the moment, and given how fucked up most of our childhoods were in some ways or another, or inadequate even, but there's such a critical time that it has a huge impact on us and kind of warps how we view the world, you know, and we're all carrying that around. And I'm not sure where you were going in relation to yoga, but yoga is supposed to help us turn and see it for what it is and not add more layers to it, you know. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of these other styles can be appealing because they kind of meet the charge of that energy, as in we get comfortable with feeling, we think we need to feel kind of on edge and energized, excited in some way.
And that's what being alive is.
Yeah,
is that, like crazy
this chemical rush, because anxiety has a hit of stress hormones, but but it can also be a same amount or to a degree that we get when we're excited, or that when we feel sharp in mind, because anxiety in general, fear in a bigger way, but not to the extreme that you shut down, but it sharpens your senses, your vision narrows, you know, like you get a rush of energy and chemicals run through your body so that you can fight or flee, you know, that you can run if you need to. And people get kind of used to that feeling, and they're coming back from that, it feels odd to them, like it's kind of distressing to them.
I'm not feeling anything anymore.
Yeah,
I'm dead inside.
Yeah. And that sense of kind of stop triggers this fear that, you know, this hypervigilance, you need to keep watching. So it just ends up in this really bad cycle for people. And that's why and most of us just chase stimulation down our entire day, from anything from TV to coffee to alcohol and drugs, and none of those things are bad in and of themselves, but when they're being done in such an automated, out of control fashion, like you're not really choosing, you think you're choosing, but actually if you stop and if you try to do the other thing, can you stop?
See, that's really interesting, because if you ask like 99 out of 100 people, and I might be one of them, if automation and out of control were the same thing, they would say no. Right?
Yeah.
But they are, right? But they are the same thing, because if it's automated, you're not making a choice. Yeah. That's fascinating.
And, you know, others would be like, oh, we are making, somewhere inside you're making that choice. And that's true. It's a very emotional place. And that's why other people that think these are very rational decisions are not. They're entirely driven from really a lot, usually anxiety and fear is at the base of most of our behavior. You know. So the yoga space, we're in this balance point again. We're just learning to deal with just tiny bits of that at a time. In therapy, we call that pendulation and titration, just being able to move back and forth between kind of feeling discomfort and then feeling okay and safety, just like you're talking about nature, kind of to rebalance back and forth. And yoga, we do that in a very concentrated way too, if it's good, again. But that means we have to have everything. We have to have a bit of stimulation. We have to have a place of rest, and we have to, you know, have more active poses, and we have to have very passive poses, and we need to be able to change. We talk about, we want to be able to do things on demand. We want to be able to rest on demand. We want to be able to engage our energy and act on demand. We don't want to be out of control and have these things automated. And this is not a head process. There is no separation between our brain and the entirety of our nervous system and everything through our body. So yoga is great that way, because to me it is, even for trauma, and this is also one of the things I'm trying to write on right now, even for complex trauma, I think it's the most effective thing. You're teaching that person how to learn how to retrain their entire system at once. It's no separation. You know, it's not like meditation. That's a very important element, which should never have been separated from yoga. That was, in fact, when the original person, Vivekananda, well, can't even say that right, probably I'm saying that wrong, when he brought yoga to the West in like the 1920s, I think it was, there was no physical practice. He brought the meditative side, he brought the sitting practices and the chant and all these other aspects of yoga. Not that physical wasn't part of it, but that's how it started. So people have then taken meditation out of yoga, and it should not be. Also, how can you possibly be present without tending to the body if your whole nervous system is your tool of awareness in the world? You know, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, people want to think I can sit for hours and I'm very present in, like, in a mental way, meditating. I can meditate for hours. I'm like, do you know what's happening in your body? No, I don't pay attention to my body, or I don't feel this pain in my hip until I stand up after 4 hours. Well, how are you fully present if you're not actually aware of the main sensing, your entire sensory sensing being?
What are you being aware with if you're not being aware with your body?
Because this thing is taking in information all the time of, you know, of the world around it. It feels. That's why our skin is a sensory object, like a sensing object, you know. So if you don't know what's going on there, is that fully present? You know, is that really present? So that whole divorcement between meditation and yoga is also incorrect.
We keep coming back to these ideas of looking at a whole system and not sort of taking the part and treating the part as though it is the whole. We're treating the part as though it can be separated from the bigger picture. And that actually reminds me a lot of the way I'm learning in these degree programs, because, and I, of course, find it really frustrating, right? Because I want to have piece by piece by piece by piece that are little puzzle pieces that then fit together and I can see the picture. But the way they teach it, they're teaching you the entirety of it. And there's no way you can actually get the entirety of it at the start. And so you have to just be very imperfect in learning the entirety instead of being very skilled at learning the tiny pieces.
Yeah.
Which is completely counter to any way I've been in school before, so it's very frustrating. But it seems related to what you were just saying. It's like trying to look at the whole picture.
Yeah, for sure. And I think again, because where we are in our human development, we want to know it. We want everything on demand. Like, we want it now. We want to understand now. We want the answer now. We want what we want now. And to really investigate anything in relation to a human experience, we have to be willing to see the complex whole, you know, and that takes time, you know, and you have to expand your capacity. You know, I think it's a great opportunity to evolve, you know, if you want to stop and actually take in and understand how something is part of the whole. Immediately you're expanding your capacity, and as you know, a species, hopefully we're doing that together, you know. I think we have the capacity to be super intelligent, all of us, and understand all of this. Some people are like, this is beyond my level of understanding. And I'm just like, no, you know, we just don't want to make associations between things for odd reasons, I think. I'm not sure why.
Well, we don't want to make associations between things, and we want it all now. Like, I want to understand it all right now. Well, okay, no.
It's such a bind. It's such a bind we get ourselves in.
Well, that reminds me, and Claire, you probably know more about this, but one of the principles of permaculture, like if you're going to try and permaculture a property, you don't do anything for a year. You just are there, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the concept is that you spend a year observing.
Yeah.
But it would be an active observation, right? So it's not just, I sat on my porch and nothing happened, you know? And we're on a property for pretty much we're in our first year, and we have been gardening, which in and of itself is a form of observation, right? Like actively engaging with the land on some level. But yeah, the idea is that you're just there seeing what's happening first and trying to understand a new context.
And because and the same goes as a teacher anyway in yoga with people. Just we have a structure to operate in. We maybe do some experiments as you would on the land, and we just learn about that system. We just learn how that system works, and maybe then we know how to, if there's something not in balance in that system, then we can tweak and do things, or if you need. And the same goes through in therapy too. A lot of time, and this is why a lot of the short-term therapy models are necessary given societal structure of insurance and all that sort of stuff, but not necessarily the best way when trying to learn about somebody. That takes time to just see how they are in relationship and how their insides are all connected and the meaning making that they make in the world.
Well, and you're really talking about being seen.
Yeah.
And people aren't used to being seen.
Yeah.
Or we crave it at the same time that we're terrified of it. Not at all speaking for myself.
Right.
And it's all just, I'll stick my hand up to that too. But it's all just, but also, once we see all that, there's not necessarily anything wrong with it. It's just in being seen. And like, you don't go to that land. Well, sometimes the land needs to be supported because usually it's been tampered with or something by humans. But otherwise, you're just trying to figure out how to be in relationship, how to reconnect in, and on every level. Yoga, we're trying to help people reconnect within their own systems, mostly. Therapy, maybe that's the attention goes outwards, and we're trying to connect on a relational level. So that in between space is more where the focus is, and then you think, and then humans to land or whatever it is. On every level of a lot of the work in the world is about figuring out how to reconnect. And that doesn't require much tampering. It requires, in the foremost, seeing and listening and that exchange of what is, without needing to change anything for maybe a long time, just to understand our piece in the puzzle. And there's something very healing about that. Even with all the difficulties, you still have your meat sack body, like right now, and you still feel better. Like, it doesn't require the change that we often think it does.
Yeah. Do you have anything else about user error? Because that's the book of yours that I'm most interested in reading. That's the one I hope you finish first.
Oh, yeah.
If you don't, that's fine. But I'm very interested in it.
Well, basically, as I mentioned, when I've looked at the yoga field and even my own, and then the psychotherapy profession, mental health professions, I'm just like, people want to say there's so much wrong with some of these very well-established systems, and I've always just been like, no, it's you. Like, or for a long time, it's me, like not understanding, not seeing enough, not again knowing this complex picture that I'm looking at yet. And I've ascribed blame or the issue outside of myself, but actually it's me. And as a culture, when I'm thinking about yoga, we've definitely done that. So the idea for the book is, well, somebody else will go write it if they get it to me first. If you do, send it to me.
No, you are free to protect your intellectual property, and if you are not able to talk about it in a way that will not enable someone else to just take it and write it, then don't talk about it. I want you to write it. I want to hear it from your perspective.
I haven't run into this place with myself yet, considering somebody to take I wasn't feeling protective of my idea before this moment.
Mm-hmm. That's the magic of the first follower. We let you know you've got something people are going to want to steal.
I think regardless, even if somebody wrote the book, I'd still be trying to work it out in myself, how to articulate it. But, it's more, there's a lot of self-help, which a lot of people want to call shelf help, like it's just shit, like put it on the shelf. Like, there's a lot of self-help kind of writings out there on dealing with the mind and body, and I just wanted to, and there's some very deep teachings, when I think about yoga and meditation, they have a lot of instruction and skill and wisdom to offer us but it's largely inaccessible to a lot of people, you know. So the term user mainly is used in like IT, computer science field and that sort of thing. When people, you know, you screw up your computer, you lock yourself out of your computer, you delete a really important file and something fucks up. Like I think I sent you the list. There's a really good number of acronyms that IT professionals on help desk use to cover up that they're really calling that person an idiot when they're saying, oh, that's like a code. That's like a user error, basically. But my idea is really how to just make some of that more accessible and to point people in the direction of where they're misunderstanding some of these teachings and provide them, so how we make user errors in relating to our mind and body through some of these methods and how to antidote that, how we actually need to work with ourselves so that we can benefit from some of these incredible systems that are still available to us and have not, at least at this point, been too distorted that we cannot reclaim what they intended for humanity. You know?
The thing I like the most about it is that it's fundamentally a stance of empowerment. Again, like if it's happening in me, it is something I can address. And that is particularly now in the face of historical moment we're in and the reality of white supremacy and a global pandemic, like so useful to be like, I can do something about that. There's something
100%.
Concrete I can do every day about that. And that's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think a lot of people have had that experience where when there's something that's going wrong or that you feel anxious about, if you feel like you can take concrete action, you just generally feel better. That's how I feel when I'm, you know, in that overwhelm state. So I think that's helpful. And
when you're all spun out.
Yeah.
When you're all spun out, you go plant something.
Yeah.
You're like, this basil is the answer.
That's
Yeah.
right.
The irony is we tie ourselves up in wanting to ascribe blame, but then we also, if we get rid of responsibility, we also let go of our ability to do anything about it. You know, even if we are the weakest, we still can. We disempower ourselves chronically in so many ways. And then we look outside of ourselves for more things that can help with that. And it's just this endless cycle when it just requires a change of how we relate to ourselves internally, which is more not just how you think about things or having this understanding, but it's an emotional thing. Like actually just being able to be a little kind and compassionate. I think that's an overused word, but it is that ultimately, to just step back to yourself and rest and say it's okay and then move from there. We're not good at that. I don't think many people are just naturally good at that. Well, we naturally maybe are, but certainly after 2 minutes on this earth with other humans, we kind of lose that capacity, I think.
We're conditioned for failure.
Claire Patton used to say, I'm very, one of my great joys is being articulate and mean at the same time. I'm a big fan of that, and I've cultivated that skill. And Claire Patton used to say, you need to stop saying such mean things about my friend Teresa. You called it cultivating the sweet boyfriend voice. Imagine how a loving person would speak to you about this and try doing it that way.
Oh, this is great. You need to use that voice when you're on the yoga mat. Bring that sweet boyfriend voice with you to yoga.
I discovered that voice when I was on a trip, and it had never existed inside of me. Like there had not been an ounce of compassion for myself my entire life. I was like, I don't know, 32, 33, and suddenly one day it was there, and I was like, holy shit, there's another way.
Wasn't Jesus 33 when they killed him?
Yeah, it's all around the 30s. Kurt Cobain. I think people either killing themselves or being killed.
Kurt Cobain. Yeah.
Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah, there you go. No, it is. But we need that comparison, because privilege is not having that comparison. And that's not necessarily a great thing in terms of empathy and having compassion for others, so that it shows up at all, just be thankful that the boyfriend voice showed up at all. Be thankful for it.
Yes.
And
thank you for
not
passing it on.
and live in that. Like, just take that on as new state, rather than many people would then beat themselves up that they spent 33 years not having that voice. Like, it doesn't work. It doesn't matter. Just keep moving.
Damn it! You got the right information. You just got the right information, and you're doing it again.
Yeah.
But that is how powerful, how conditioned we are sometimes, because it is super robust, that space, that voice of just aggressive,
mean,
yeah.
Well, and it seems like that's a lot of what you're talking about with certain yoga practices that sort of promote that, maybe, I don't know, self-aggression or competitiveness or
competitiveness, yes.
Yeah, where it's like,
there are yoga competitions. I'm sorry.
You know, it's always so clear from the outside where you look at someone and you're like, dude, you don't need that. That's not where, like,
right.
In terms of balance, that's not the direction you need to
yes.
go into. You need to take a nap.
Yeah.
Like, that's... Or, like you said, find that place of balance within yourself, of balance of, again, what I'm thinking of as rest and disturbance, or discomfort and movement and restoration, you know.
We want to be able to just move between these two. We want to be able to move everywhere and in every way, you know. So it's like, how do we actually get that? And those people doing fancy poses, not even accurately, their bodies are not equipped to do them without creating issues, which will happen. Most people, they're just chasing that for something else, and that's really sad to me. And because what's sadder is, okay, because the one day that stops working for them, and that they realize, actually, this is not great for me, either how I relate to myself and hold my mind, or what I'm doing to my body, and then where do they turn? Because they have associated yoga with that mental state that they're now trying to get away from. And so they will likely discount any yoga in front of them. And that's sad to me, because then the practices that at least I'm teaching, and I'm sure over time others will, and there's definitely good independent teachers out there for sure that have put some of this together, but they won't turn to the very thing then that could help them. And that's that saddens me and frustrates me immensely at times too when I think of that picture that's happening.
Well, I like that frustrates you, but you're perfectly willing for it to take 7 years for people. You're like, hey, you should really, because another person we knew back from the army days has also started taking classes with you, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And it took her about the same amount of time as it took me. A little less, maybe.
Yeah, and she's going to have other lessons to learn. Just as a heavy meditator. Sorry if you're listening, because you know who you are.
But you can, there's possible deniability. Nobody can prove it.
Claire, don't worry, no one listens to this.
Yeah, well, and that's my fault, as we've discussed.
Come on, guys, one day. We need to be consistent. If you start talking about how to actually crack into being different with yourself, you have to do something consistently and commit to it. It's for it to really have an impact, I
was like so excited. I was like, wow, this is the most consistent I've been. I've been going twice a week, and boy, that's really, and then I'm like,
and you did another month. You didn't quit after a month of trying something.
I came to month number 2. That's true.
I mean, it's a little different because it's me.
It is. Well, and you're like, oh, if it took you, I would never take this class from anyone else. I'd just be like, fuck this bitch. But with you, I'm like, no, Claire knows what she's talking about, though. Claire knows. Just Claire. Just listen to Claire. It'll be fine. I'm your first follower. I'll do it. See, I'm looking for a cult leader. Come on.
So speaking of first followers, Claire, if people are out there seeking balance and want to take a yoga class from you, how do they find you?
Yes, you can look up Kayut Yoga St. Louis. At the moment, well, at this moment, recording in COVID times, everybody's online, but we will probably keep online classes, and I get the benefit of being able to teach through one of our schools, our Kaiut schools in America. So I'm on American friendly time. My classes. Kaiut Yoga St. Louis, yeah, Kaiut Yoga St. Louis. And you can also look into our main Kaiut Yoga hub.com, and my teacher is on there teaching online too, and you know, you may want to come practice with me if you are listening, but he's also pretty decent. He has a lot of good things going on. That's a huge understatement.
That's awesome.
So, yes, I don't know a better way. After 20 years of concertedly trying to fix myself, not suffer, heal myself, all the different variations of how that's come up in my life, this is where I've landed, and I for once feel like, oh, this is what I've been looking for, and this is the deal. And I don't like to sell things, and I'm usually way more skeptical than oh my gosh, I found like the moment, this is the aha moment of life for me. But yeah, it's very robust, and it's proving to be super beneficial for a lot of people. So you can only come and experiment and try for yourself if you are looking for balance and more flow in a genuine way, and to get rid of some lingering things that are stuck in your body, for sure.
It's amazing what comes up. I'm like, oh, what was in the back of that shoulder? Wonder what that was. I kind of want to like name them as they leave. I'm like, hey, 6th grade bullies, what's up?
That would be amazing. Yeah.
My 6th grade bullies left.
See what that does. Yeah. if those things are coming up, you get to let go.
I sometimes do wish that when those physical ailments came, they came with a really clear mental picture of like your history, of like where that is in your history.
Yeah.
That would be really helpful.
Remember that time you hit your sister for no reason? That's what this is.
Just trust that whatever it is, you can let it go. If it shows up, it's ready to be gone.
Right. Yeah. If it comes out, it's ready to go. That's a great point.
And yep.
We originally wanted to call this when I was like, hey, do you want to... We were chatting, and I was like, well, you're just going to talk about this on the podcast. That's clearly what's going to happen next. It was originally going to be called Claire Loves Suffering. So do you have something that you can say you love about suffering, or is that one of those ideas that was there in its entirety and is now gone?
I think that most people, if you really look closely, there was the automatic just engaging in ways that created a lot of suffering. So on that level, growing up, there was, from the outside, you could be like, wow, she really loves suffering. Like, why is she continuing to create so much? Not that I created all of it by any means, or for any of us that we created all of it. We're carrying a lot of stuff that was handed to us and continually gets handed to us. And, but I think I was thinking of that more because I've spent my life and spend my days still looking into suffering and how to deal with it and how to navigate it and heal. And I don't love using that word either, but I can't think of a better one, like actually end suffering. So in that way, it still holds, just from a different perspective.
Cool. That's great.
And it seems to me like you described suffering as a uniquely human experience, and in that sense, 100%. It sounds like you're fascinated with it, And I
didn't come up with that. I think Buddhism said that. Right. And I think if any of us just look around, I think we'd be hard pressed to find somebody that, below the surface would say, oh, they don't know what suffering is. This is it. There's stress. Nature has stress and times of destruction, and that's what we consider suffering. And when that happens within ourselves, it's what we are trying to navigate. We're actually trying to minimize it, but we will never get rid of it. That's that's a whole deeper conversation on karma in the physical form, perhaps. But and the sooner that we can kind of turn towards it in degrees and ways that we have enough safety and can manage enough, or maybe feels a little risky, but that we're committed to really seeing what's inside and on the other side of it, we will find a way out, you know, if it's done with enough space and enough support and enough brutal honesty with oneself about what's going on.
That's one of my favorite things.
Brutal honesty. Yeah. It's the irony of, to get rid of suffering, we kind of have to turn towards, you know, we don't think it's that, but that is the way. We have to go through. There's some other pieces to that picture that maybe doesn't mean we have to go right through it to the depth of it, but yeah, in general, we have to have the willingness to, in the very least.
Thank you so much for coming and talking to us today in your tomorrow morning.
Yeah, happy to ramble from the future.
Hey, what happens tomorrow? Can you tell us anything?
It's pretty sunny. I think about another 10,000 COVID cases and
Oh, shit.
more suffering.
I hate the future!
Because people will not put masks on.
But
they
don't
just
worry,
won't.
it's no worse and no better than this present moment, so just be at peace with it all. No, thanks for having me on. If anybody is listening, I hope some of that was randomly, like whatever came out was somewhat useful or interesting to you.
Yeah, that's this podcast.
Yeah.
It's like a jumble shop.
I can bring it. That's my life and my mind.
Claire, it's been so lovely having you on. Thank you so much.
You too, Claire.
We're going to change the name of this podcast to Two Claires and a Tea.
Oh, I like that too.
Thanks everybody for listening.
Testing. Great. Thank you for listening to It Chooses You. Your hosts are Teresa Sparks and Claire Patton. Our theme song is by Bobby Dart. If you'd like to get in touch with us, drop us an email at itchoosesyoupodcast@gmail.com.